Okay. Okay. Tim, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great, Brian. Yeah.
All right, there you go. Then that means we're live. We're good to go. Welcome everybody to this session, the second part session, the human equation. Last week I had the privilege of working with Jason Anker, the other half of Anker Marsh. Today we're talking with Tim Marsh, and we're going to be specifically talking about the brain science behind behavioral changes that lead to working safe. Right? It's about Tim and I both come at this from what we care about which is workers being safe on the job, but that really starts with well-being, and well-being really starts with the brain science, and that's where Tim's going to come in and really help us kind of work through what matters the most when it comes to this. So our agenda, well, by the way, at 28 minutes, so we're going to be fairly tight and quick in what we go through. We'll be asking some questions along the way, and any questions you might have, you're welcome to put in the chat, and we'll get to them by the end. And if we don't get to them, we'll follow up with them after the fact. So your panel of experts is right here, myself and Tim. We're going to talk about engagement to get the ball rolling a little bit. We're going to talk about, how much of mental health as it relates to worker safety is in the news these days, and follow on from there to, what it takes to get more engagement and better results. And so why don't I just right now ask Tim, you can read his bio, it's on screen, but let me just ask him to do sort of a informal introduction of himself to start off.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tim Marsh. I led the first behavioural safety research, or one of the two leaders in the UK back in early 1990 at the university, because James Reason was there, who died last week, the great safety writer. From there, spent the 90s doing behavioural safety on oil rigs. Worked from there in safety leadership, safety culture, organizational culture generally. But before I did any of that, I looked at suicides in the UK Army. And so for me, my career has come full circle to looking at well-being and mental health at work, and very much writing these days and doing podcasts like this with Brian to talk about the link between mindset, well-being, mental health, and incidents and accidents of all types.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And so I'm Brian Galonic. As it says there, for 24 years, I've been running this company. This company, All Star Incentive Marketing, which produces the AllSafe platform, is here to help our customers, our corporate clients, improve safety and health and well-being as well. And what it's you never stop learning. And even as I get here in the back nine, as they say, of my career, I've really begun to learn a great deal more about how much of what it is we do connects back to brain health, right? And how much of, we talk about behavior, we talk about the behaviors that we want to change on job sites, but all of that really connects back to where our people's workers' mental state is. And so it's been very eye-opening for me to really look at it from this side and really see the world through the lens that Tim uses here as well. So really looking forward to sharing this data with you. And but for starters, I'm going to pick it up where I normally do. So this is the data that relates to the engagement levels within the United States. It's state of the American workplace. For our international viewers, state of the global workplace tells very much a very similar story. And the story that it tells here, and I can do entire presentations on this, but I won't. That's not what today's all about. But really the story that it tells here is that a sizable portion, the largest portion of a company's workforce in general, are not actively engaged at work. Some are actively disengaged, really bad brand ambassadors and not good employees. But the majority, this 50 going on 60%, are just not actively engaged at work. And that really is something that when you distill it down, comes back to mental health and mental acuity and really where their head's at. So I guess I'll start here just by asking Tim a question. Well, really quickly before I do, this is a $500 billion problem as defined by Gallup, this lack of engaged employees. So it's not a small issue for the countries as a whole and for the individuals and for the companies, but it also is, and it's scary, but millennials, the younger you go, the more they're disengaged, right? So older workers tend to be more engaged than younger workers. Millennials, by the way, now are as old as 45. So we're not talking about kids anymore. So you're really talking about Gen Z coming in behind them. Gen Zers are as old as 30. So the younger you go, the more disengaged they work. They are disengaged employees are inherently perhaps not healthy, but definitely inherently unsafe or less safe. And so you can see where the challenge here is. I guess with that in mind, Tim, I just want to ask you a question. So I think we all know leadership is key, but some leaders who do seem to get it, at least they think they get it, don't actually get it. They still get it wrong. Picking up on that, what do you think leadership doesn't see when it comes to this aspect of mental health and employee engagement?
I'm not sure it's that they don't see it. I think that a lot of people still feel it's just not their issue, that it's blaming the victim, that it's none of their business, that huge amounts of mental health and well-being come from home, relationships, families, and all that. And I think they are mistaken. All the studies seem to show that we spend more time with our colleagues than we do with our families. That meaning and purpose in life come from our work. The good work is good for your mental health and well-being. Bad work is bad for you. Good work is good for you because it gives you meaning, it gives you purpose, it gives you traction, it gives you banter and camaraderie. So classically in the UK, soldiers who do a very dangerous job, their suicide rates are absolutely bang normal. Not so for ex-soldiers. And so work is incredibly important and key in this field, and not all leaders appreciate that that is true.
Yeah, it's such a great point. Just coming back to me, I've done a previous presentation that was related to wellness also, and one of the slides there was that returning to work is very much one of the best ways to get healthy again, right? For those that have had to step out of work for one reason or another, whether it's related to physical injuries or mental issues, the getting back on the job is one of the best ways to get healthy again. So it's a really, really telling issue for sure. This next slide I'm going to go to, and I apologize, this is one of Tim's slides, and it didn't quite set up correctly, so you have to read through the background, but he can do it. Why don't you speak to this a little bit? And you can see, if the word in the middle there is peace, but you can speak a little bit to what's graphically on screen and what it means to your research.
Yes, Brian. I mean, we started quite well with this presentation, despite the fact that everything to do with IT was not working 2 minutes before we got online. I think
Right.
The fact that we don't look too traumatized is to our credit, frankly. Anyway, this slide we couldn't fix, and what it is, it's a shame you can't see it. It's a slide that a lot of people like to look at, and what it essentially says is, when we talk about mental health, about 15% is the really serious stuff: schizophrenia, bipolar, psychoses, post-traumatic stress disorder, hormonal issues to do with childbirth. I mean, stuff that really kicks your backside, and you do need a basket of treatments to deal with. But 85%, and again, estimates of $1 trillion to the US economy, are just the things on this slide that you can't see very well. And it essentially says, look, depression is merely thinking about things that have already happened in a negative way, regret and so on. Now you're allowed to do that in order to prompt learning, or I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. I regret that. But once you've done that, every minute you spent thinking of something that's already happened is a minute stolen from the moment, hence the little meditating gnome you can't quite see, to be in the moment, hence mindfulness. Anxiety, on the other hand, is merely something that hasn't happened yet that you're thinking about in a negative way. Now, again, you're allowed to do that briefly to prompt excellence. I'm going to make a real effort because I'm keen for this to succeed. But once you've done that, every minute you spend thinking about something that hasn't happened yet in a negative way steals a minute from you working in the present to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so again, get in the middle, be in the moment, and you'll all be familiar with mindfulness by now. And there's really two things that organizations can do. One is to get their head, three things. One is to get their head around the fact this isn't scary. This isn't new. We've always had this thought that you either have mental health or you don't have mental health. But actually, all of us think all these things every day. It's just a question of how many you think, and does it get in the way, or is it just the downside, the down bits of the day. And so it's a question of degree. And what can organizations do? Well, two things. One is, if you're drifting to the outside of the diagram and it is beginning to get in the way, and we all know people who are beginning to really wobble and struggle, how proactively and constructively can we jump in and help them? Now, ideally, with a bit of coaching and a conversation and a cup of coffee. Could be worse than that. Could be we need to refer them to employee assistance programs and so on. So it's that proactive response to early signs of an issue. The second thing is, we've already discussed this, good work is good for you. You are mentally healthier having a job that you enjoy, gives you traction, meaning, purpose, banter. So if we can create a really rich, empowering and engaging working culture, which is where Brian started, then we can keep people in the middle naturally. And that's what this diagram is trying to show. The bits that are on top they're causing all the trouble. It's also true, of course, that you cannot be particularly depressed and you cannot be particularly anxious, but you cannot be particularly bothered. And so a cross reference with this, you have to have a 2x2 matrix, don't you? Always is to what degree are you really empowered and engaged? Because you don't a lot of books post-COVID talk about languishing, people who just can't be bothered to check my language, and we want to get them up the mojo tree, if you like.
I like that. I would tell you that I just I'm talking to you here from Massachusetts, and we're a frozen tundra right now. It's been a pretty tough winter, and my wife and I just did a 10-day trip to Florida, where it's the opposite. It's 80 degrees and perfect. And but my wife doesn't like to fly, and we just spent days, the couple days before the trip, getting on the plane to go down there. And I'm looking at the right side of your chart there. You're talking about unease, anxiety, tension, and stress, and worry, and all those forms. And then we had a great 8 or 9 days in the middle. And then she spent the 24 hours before we hopped on a plane and came home in heavy winds with all those anxieties and stresses as well. And I say this, jokingly, but not jokingly, like it affected her in a negative way for days leading up to the flight down, and in part for a day or so before we flew home, and took away some of her enjoyment. Now, that's not a job. But you can see when you look in your own life and you see these types of examples, and I'm sure you have them as well, you can easily see how relative to your work, if you have those kind of stress levels relative to the work you're doing, it's only going to make you less effective, maybe less safe, in terms of you can't have that kind of level of stress and anxiety and be thinking as clearly as you want to be going forward. And so I think that's really important. Wanted to just mention that as well. And you said something a couple slides back I just wanted to jump on as well, which is, we have them for 8 to 9, 10 hours a day, meaning that, your work is the biggest part, or as big as your non-working waking part of your life, right? You sleep for 8 hours, you work for 8 hours, and you have about 8 hours to yourself during the normal work week. So you spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time in the companies we work for. And that's why when I do have a CEO, to come back to what a CEO's thinking, do they get it? Do they not get it? What I have had people say to me, CEOs and higher level C-suiters say is, how is that my issue? It's not my problem. It's not the nanny state. I'm not here to solve all of their problems. I'm here to give them a good paycheck for a good day's work. But the obvious, and most people don't think like that. Most people aren't that callous. I may be overstating it, but for the most part, it doesn't jump to top of mind because it doesn't feel like it's something the employer should have to deal with. But when it affects their work, their level of engagement, their level of safe work, their level of happiness on the job, the likelihood they're going to stay with the job, even if it's not for magnanimous reasons, even if it's not because you're a thinking, feeling, caring person who empathizes with them, do it for the dollars and cents side of things, which is really a couple of slides back here as well. All right, well, just moving on, because that was more of a recap from a couple of the thoughts I had while you were talking. What's on screen here is just basically to say that this has now become I can't believe it's jumping off the page now. So the Procore is a company that makes software that many, many construction companies use. And Procore has decided, and their software helps you manage the job sites and take pictures and put up punch lists and track what's going on. And it's very much about the day-to-day functionality of a job site. But Procore, despite the fact that they make software that does that, has taken on this construction worldwide as one of the highest suicide rates in the sector, and we want to help make that change. So they've taken this on as a core issue that they want to address. And this is now, this came out in January, last month, as did the article on the right, the silent hazard, the study of mental health and suicide in the construction industry, right? Same type of thing. This is ASSP, American Society for Safety Professionals, on the right-hand side. That's their article. Project 61 down the bottom, just a really quick mention. Project 61 has basically studied that at least in the United States, long-haul truck drivers, okay, career drivers, on average are dying at the age of 61. This is when this first hits you, you stop for a minute, go Google it, look it up yourself. Obviously, if you drove a truck for 2 years, this isn't the case. But if you're a career long haul truck driver in the United States, your life expectancy is on average 16, 17 years less than just the average normal American worker. And so that is pretty daunting. And that's because of, you can see a little bit on screen there, over high levels of obesity, high levels of stress, low levels of taking care of themselves on the healthcare side. These are largely their own choices, partially the fact that they sit down for big chunks of the day. But mental health, stress, suicide rates in this culture that's out there has become just something really, really important to deal with. And I think it's really bubbling up now and everybody's conscious. I guess, Tim, let me just, while we're on the screen, just ask you. So we know that, some organizations are beginning to take a more holistic approach to it, in terms of looking at both well-being and health and safety as a joint issue, but just want to get your comments on that aspect of it.
Yeah, well, psychological safety is really three things. If you look at Edmondson's work, the first one is being unafraid to pass bad news up. And the classic example of not doing that well would be maybe BP back in the day. Notoriously, it was, anybody got a problem with these cuts? No, good, get on with it then. And then, of course, you have Texas City, you have Deepwater. The second thing is being unafraid to ask for help. Every approach to mental health on the planet says it's good to talk. If you can ask for help, what you do is you ask for help from a colleague. And any classic model of well-being, number 5 will be giving help to other people. Supporting and encouraging and contributing. So it's a double win. You get help and somebody gets to give you help. So that's excellent. And the third one, of course, is that you're unafraid to make an honest mistake and be treated fairly for it. And then we're squarely in the just culture field. And if you've seen the monkeys going crazy if they get cucumber rather than grapes, the famous video, if you haven't, look it up. The one thing on the planet that absolutely we hate is to be treated unfairly. Even more, being unfair is treated and considered much more harshly than being illegal. Laws are just a kind of catch-all to try and make you behave fairly to people, often written by people who have vested interest in the rules. But we'll move on from that. But those three things absolutely underpin a strong culture. You're passing information, useful information, up and down the chain. You're unafraid to ask for help when you need it, rather than just soldiering on until you go pop. You're being treated fairly. A just culture underpins a learning culture where you're trying to understand what's happening and why it's happening. So we're off into Carol Dweck's mindset. What's going wrong? Why is it going wrong? What are we going to do about it? Or Matthew Syed's black box thinking that says an adult analytical approach to learning is the most important thing on the planet, because, and he talks about societies, countries, organizations, individuals, and so on. So, psychological health and psychological safety might sound really fluffy and the latest buzz thing that somebody from Canada came up with, but actually the day-to-day behaviors and habits that it's talking about underpin excellence. If you get those right, you get things like less turnover of your best staff. Right. You get less presenteeism, less absenteeism, more discretionary effort, fewer spurious claims coming in, better mental health, and fewer accidents and incidents. Because people who are having a really bad day, they tend to be more fatalistic. People who are having a really bad day tend to be less situationally aware because they're more easily distracted. And they tend to have worse quality conversations and take worse quality decisions. And all three of those definitely have been proved over the years to directly link to incidents and accidents of all types.
Totally agree. And I would say you just mentioned it, being treated unfairly is the worst, right? People don't want to be treated unfairly; they hate it. I would put that right next to sort of something that we talk about all the time, that the number one reason why people leave their jobs is lack of recognition, right? Overcompensation. It's hard to believe, but believe it or not, especially in today's day and age, lack of recognition is more likely to be cited as a reason why you leave your job than compensation. And I put that right in the category of being treated fairly. If you're doing your job 365 days a year and your boss never says anything to you, right? Then you get your review and he or she tells you what you're doing wrong. That's being treated unfairly in many ways. And it's certainly a lack of recognition. And if you lasted that long at all, you're already looking for a job. And you're certainly not engaged in the company's message. You don't really care about the company culture because the company doesn't seem to care about you. And this comes back to, again, on the engagement and recognition side, giving managers the tools to act on engagement, to not let these moments go by and let people think they went unnoticed and they're just a number in a cubicle, and to really get them mentally, engaged with what's going on with the company, and to feel appreciated and to be appreciated, not just feel appreciated. And back to the mental health side, the stigmatism finally, thankfully, fading, that if somebody is having excessive amounts of stress, anxiety, depression, and wearing that openly, that you don't just ignore it and hope they get better. Rub some dirt in it is what my old football coach used to say. You're hurt, rub some dirt in it, get back on the field. I mean, let's face it, you want mentally healthy employees out there driving your trucks, swinging hammers and doing good work for their sake and for the companies. This slide, which I pivoted to here, is really just meant to tell a story that I think most people understand, is that most of your health is within your control, but that doesn't mean you don't need help, right? Your individual behaviors matter. Obviously, you can see at the bottom there, when somebody says, well, what can I do? Is, sure, yes, you could be born with a very bad disease and genetically speaking beyond your control. How you deal with it might be well within your control, but your environment, your medical care, your social circumstances, and including where you go and outreach for help, and whether or not your friends, your family, your company are there to help you get over the hump, right? The fact that it's within your control doesn't mean you know how to hold back your anxiety or make it dissipate. But you can with the right training, and you can if there's enough caring out there in the world to do exactly that. Tim, anything you want to touch on here, or do you want to go to that to the next slide?
Well, I just wanted to jump back to what you were talking about, a real life example. We talk about thinking fast, thinking slow, and how 90% of what's going on is instinctive, and the instinctive stuff is much deeper than the transactional stuff. So the undercover boss, it's popular in America and the UK. Every program ends with the same thing. The boss calls in the worker, says, oh, I'm the boss. And I just want to say, you've been brilliant. I've learned loads. I'm going to give you a pay rise. I'm going to give you a new job here at head office. They always say that. And the person on the receiving end says, oh, brilliant. Thanks. A bigger car. Wait till I tell the wife or the husband. Yeah. And then they always end up with saying, and just to say, I just didn't realize what fabulous people I had working for me. I'm so impressed with you as a person. And every single time that person will well up, because you're getting them somewhere much deeper than I'm going to give you a pay rise.
Right.
Just to build on the point you made before. So,
yeah.
So, and that wonderful feeling of, has multiple benefits. And Maya Angelou, people forget what you said and what you did, but they never forget how you made them feel. So.
Yeah. Well, and to paraphrase another one, 90% of life is just showing up. It's showing up in this case means telling them they did a good job. I mean, how often do you see somebody say, oh my God, that person did something really nice for me. I should really thank them, or, get them a bottle of wine or do something. It happens all the time, in our world, and it's self fulfilling here for me to basically say this, but it's true. In our world, we build the programs that make it really, really, really easy, seamless to recognize somebody for doing a good job. I mean, that's the biggest part of what our solutions do, is to make it easy for you to say, because you're in the middle of a busy day as well, and you got a lot of things going on, but you really want to thank, Jane, who did this wonderful thing for you. But if you let more than 5 minutes go by, chances are you forget all about it, and you never do. If we make it seamless and easy and institutional for you to say thank you, for you to recognize that person, then we start to improve the relationship between managers and employees, and employees and employees. And obviously, the expression that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And that's generally about lack of recognition, and lack of recognition is generally a lack of awareness and a lack of having useful tools that make it seamless to do exactly that. I don't know if this pivots well or not, because this slide is yours. And honestly, I'm not exactly sure where we're going next, but why don't you talk about situational awareness and what this means to you?
Okay. I want to talk about excellence, and then I want to talk about physiological limitations of people really quickly, and end up with an explanation as to why mental health plugs directly into all this. And I'll do it quickly because I'm looking at the clock. This is Juan Fangio, Spanish motor racing driver, Formula One, not your indie stuff, your Formula One, the proper stuff, obviously. Huh? And anyway, he's driving at Le Mans in France, and he's about to drive into the back of the worst accident in motor racing history, 88 people killed. He came in a blind corner and he slowed. And afterwards they said, how on earth could you know to slow? There's a blind corner. And he said, well, look, I'm Fangio, twice a world champion in the last 3 years. I'm driving a bright silver Mercedes at 200 miles an hour. and I noticed that nobody was looking at me. So I knew something was up. That's pretty switched on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, next slide though, Brian. I think you've got control of the slides.
Yep.
There should be another slide coming up there. Okay. Great. So what you see on the left there, again, we've got build issues going on, but we can work around it. That on the left-hand side is you on your very best day. You cannot concentrate on average for more than 55 minutes an hour, no matter how good a day you're having. This is a person who slept well, who takes exercise, who's got no financial worries, no relationship worries. They get on with their boss, they enjoy their job. They're still going to spend 5 minutes an hour away with the fairies, as it says. It's a British expression, means disconnected and vague, or beta state, if you like. Problem with that is, if you've got a 10,000 employee organization, that is an awful lot of risk time. And at this point, we could jump sideways into bow tie theory and how you stop people hurting themselves when they inevitably make mistakes. But we haven't got time for that. The example I'm showing there is, in the UK, we play rugby and we play football. I know, you have your basketball and American football with lots and lots of breaks. But in the UK, we stop for half time after 40 or 45 minutes. Now, they're professional athletes. They can run for 90 minutes, no problem. But referees and crowds need a break. So you see this in everyday life. The next slide, please. And what we got there in the middle is, on an average, that's an average day, much more risk. And then on the far side, a bad day. And in good old-fashioned behavioural safety terms, what you often see is, last quarter we had 4 accidents, and they were all really stupid accidents where some idiot has not looked what they were doing with their feet and tripped over the trip hazard that was right in front of them. So send a memo out saying, everybody make sure not to trip over anything. A much better approach is to say, look, in the 50 minutes when you're bright and alert, if you stop and tidy up a trip hazard, it won't be there to fall over 20 minutes from now when you come back around the corner away with the fairies, as we say. It's the second approach is just much more effective. And obviously the third slide there, my final slide is, that's what a bad day looks like. You can imagine the risk associated with that. And we've already talked about distraction, low situational awareness, poor quality interactions, poor quality decisions, high levels of fatalism, as Jason described last week, and so on. And the bottom line is, to have a big blue pie day, it could be that you work in an organization you hate and you just can't wait to get to 5 o'clock. It could be that you brought stuff home from work, relationship issues, financial issues, health issues, and so on. It could be that you're tired, and fatigue, is a huge growth area in human error. And the fourth and final reason is, you could be towards the outside of my little cartoon. Yeah. And you're just massively preoccupied with mental health issues and depression and anxiety, all of which are not pointing you towards excellence. They're pointing you towards all those things we discussed before, none of which are any good for the individual or the team, and they're certainly not good for making you money. And that's me trying to tie it all together and say, this is a win-win situation here, and articulating that to C-suites is key. But they're beginning to listen, which is good.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, win-win-win. You can keep adding the wins, right? Win for the worker, win for their coworkers, win for the company, win for the family at home. Again, it's not just you can't just wash your hands of the health, mental health, physical health, well-being of your workers because they get a paycheck for the job they do. It really does improve everybody's shared goals when they're more engaged, when they feel more recognized. When they feel mentally healthy, and that comes from, again, doing good work and being recognized for it as well. This slide, and I know we're really up against time here, but I do want to just mention that it's wonderful when somebody is intrinsically motivated. When you notice your child being intrinsically motivated, getting up early, working out to try to make the team or do well at school, boy, I'll tell you what, that is really encouraging, right? It feels awesome. It feels great for them, for you, and that intrinsic motivation probably comes from good parenting, at least in that example. But clearly, all of us need help, right? Babies, that screen I showed earlier that talked about health and where it comes from and how so much of it's under your control. Nobody's born, there's no baby that's been born out there that thinks to themselves, I want to be a truck driver and hopefully I'll die early, right? So, you end up making these choices along the way and you're guided in many ways. But to be intrinsically motivated, I think we all are in some ways, whether it's about our golf game or fishing or raising our family or whatever it might be. But we're not all intrinsically motivated to do everything that we do. And work is a great example. Again, coming back to that first slide, maybe a third of your workers, if you're a really good company, are intrinsically motivated to show up, carry the company culture, do the best work they can, be a good coworker, be if they're a manager, be a good manager and recognize their workers. And the rest of it comes from coaching and teaching, right, and learning. And this is where recognition programs and incentives come in. When you have a recognition program that really recognizes and rewards people on a regular basis for doing the behavior, right, for wearing the personal protective equipment before they get on the job site. They get that visual of the guy with the hard hat under his arm who walks on the job site every morning, puts himself in risky behavior before he puts the hard hat on, right? Whereas when he's getting recognized and rewarded for doing it the right way time and time again, you're likely to get that behavior. And what you end up with is sort of muscle memory, right? I mean, this is like putting your seatbelt on in the car and what have you. Eventually, maybe it's not something you did naturally growing up, but you start doing it over a period of time. It's like anything else you were sort of taught to do. Once you do it often enough, and obviously it's got an ancillary, a secondary benefit to you, you start doing it as a normal course of action. And so you can get more and more people who don't necessarily have the intrinsic behaviors you want them to be healthy and safe workers on the site, to do so by nudging them. You can't just browbeat them once at a meeting and hope they got it, right? You nudge them piece by piece by piece with recognition and my world rewards as well. And you eventually get them to do the behaviors that make them safer day in, day out. And that's really where culture and what your culture is all about. How many of those workers intrinsically or extrinsically and eventually build the muscle memory to do the behavior. Tim, I know we're basically out of time, but if those that want to stick around can hear our closing comments. Anything you want to say on that piece of it?
No, I'll just to agree.
Okay, got it. Perfect. And then I guess I'll just come to this slide right here, which is to say that safety, and you can see to the left of it, wellness, well-being, training, peer-to-peer recognition, spot recognition, corporate identity, length of service, all of these things, and you could just continue to add spokes on this wheel. These things all envelop employee engagement, right? And so, and touching every single one of those things is brain health, right? It's really, again, we talked about it at length here about wellness, about safety, but in everything else, you're really talking about how engaged you are, how mentally in tune you are with what it is you're attempting to do is really going to affect your behavior. And so what's the takeaway for the national safety manager that might be on the phone, or the chief people officer? You say, okay, that's all great. I get it. Everything comes from this brain, this greatest thing in the known universe, this human brain, the most complex machinery ever invented. I get it. It matters. Well, I think the main takeaway I would say from you is when you're aware that it matters, you can start to build out your corporate efforts, your programs around this and not ignore it, right? Use mental health as a precursor for building out what you want to accomplish in the rest of your programs. Factor it in, rely on experts. I would say that openly, rely on experts to help you think through what it means to build a program that really maps well to the human condition that we're all constantly dealing with. Tim, on that note, any closing thoughts?
No, Brian, I know we've run over time, and I'll just to say I've had a decent chance to have a say, so I'll just agree. We concur on this, and I'm looking for any messages that might come through from any delegates we have here.
Yeah, exactly. And so for those of you on the line, the QR codes just point right to our collective email addresses and contact information. So if you want a copy of the presentation, simply message me. You can do so by copying that QR code. If you want to get a message off to Tim or Jason, who spoke with us last week, you're welcome to do so as well. Use the QR code just to get their emails to pop up. Any questions that did come in that we didn't have time to get to, because Tim and I kind of riffed here a little bit, which is great. I will follow up with and answer those through LinkedIn and push those messages back out to you as well. A huge thank you to Tim Marsh and also to Jason Anker, who joined us again last week, for doing this two-part series on wellness, well-being, mental health, safety, and engagement. I think it's been very, very instructive. I thank you all for being here. And as I said before, reach out to us if you want more information. Thank you.